3:12 a.m. Strait of Hormuz. The radar of an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer patrolling the blockade suddenly sounds the red alert. Dozens of high-speed lights are hurtling toward them from multiple directions like a swarm of angry bees attacking a hornet's nest. Iran has just launched a swarm attack. In just 90 seconds, dozens of IRGC fast attack boats will be within rocket range. Will the U.S. Navy react in time, or will the Strait of Hormuz become a graveyard? The geopolitical landscape has just been turned upside down. After diplomatic channels completely collapsed, Washington's maximum pressure campaign has backed Tehran into a corner. In a desperate bid for survival, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has launched Operation Hormuz Gatekeeper. Their mission is to establish absolute control over the world's most critical maritime choke point. Iran is no longer merely issuing threats. They are demanding protection fees and declaring they will turn the strait into a graveyard for any Western oil tanker daring to challenge them. 3:20 a.m. At the eye of the storm is an Arleigh Burke-class Flight 3 destroyer, a $2 billion engineering masterpiece from Lockheed Martin. But it is not alone. Above the clouds, Boeing's all-seeing eye, the P-8A Poseidon, the U.S. Navy's premier C-4ISR command and control hub, is continuously transmitting mapping data to the fleet. The P-8A Poseidon detected mobile missile launchers and a fleet of high-speed boats leaving their hiding place immediately. To establish a reconnaissance perimeter, an MH-60R Seahawk helicopter took off, deploying sonar buoys and detection equipment to scan for Moham acoustic mines beneath the murky water. 3:30 a.m. over the Strait of Hormuz, the digital fog begins to thicken. The P-8A Poseidon, the U.S. Navy's Airborne Command Center, shifts from passive surveillance to direct coordination. The crew deploys a series of AN/SSQ-53G radio buoys. Originally designed for anti-submarine warfare, these sensors are recalibrated to detect the acoustic signatures of IRGC speedboats' engines amid the turbulent waves. A real-time digital map with extreme precision pinpointing the Iranian fleet's location is established. The data is immediately encrypted and transmitted to the fleet via the Link 16 system. 3:35 a.m. Thanks to this data, the MH-60R Seahawk, flying on the edge of the combat zone, carried out the first physical strike. From a distance of 8 kilometers beyond the range of Iran's 12.7mm machine guns, the crew locked onto the command vessels via the MTS electro-optical system. 2 AGM-114 Hellfire missiles were fired, tearing through the night with long trails of fire. The laser-guided missiles precisely destroyed the lead boats in a blaze of fire and shrapnel. The IRGC formation faltered as its command center sustained damage, causing communication between the smaller boats to begin breaking down. 3:40 a.m. The IRGC immediately launched an asymmetric counterattack. An electronic wall was erected as hundreds of Ababil decoy drones were launched from coastal caves. On the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer's AN/SPY-6 radar, the initial 50 targets suddenly multiplied into 500 flickering blips. The Aegis combat system struggled to classify the threat amid intense metal clutter and high-intensity electronic noise. At the same time, Fajr 5 rocket launchers on the coastal cliffs unleashed a barrage of rockets. Rather than targeting the ship directly, they fired hundreds of rockets into the water in a grid pattern around the U.S. destroyer. A series of massive 15-meter-high water columns created a continuous curtain of saltwater spray and steam that shrouded the ship. This was a tactical smoke screen designed to blind infrared sensors and laser rangefinders, forcing the U.S. crew to operate in an extremely tense sea of digital and physical interference. 3:47 a.m. The battle reached its climax as Iranian coastal units began to lock on to the U.S. fleet. The Arleigh Burke-class destroyer immediately initiated C-80 operations. Utilizing coordinates from the P-8A, the Mark 41 vertical launch system fired a salvo of precision-guided missiles, destroying the threatening launchers the moment they locked onto the radar. Simultaneously, the SLQ-32 electronic warfare system emitted an extremely powerful concentrated energy beam, overwhelming the receivers of the IRGC's coastal radars. This combined firepower and electronic warfare strike created a temporary blind spot along the Iranian coastline, a narrow window of opportunity the U.S. Navy had been waiting to exploit. 3:50 a.m. As the main air bases were overwhelmed by long-range interception missions, a pair of A-10C Thunderbolt IIs from the Forward Al Dhafra base were urgently deployed. These warthogs had been specially trained for the swarm-busting scenario. Unlike supersonic fighters, the A-10 can maintain a steady, slow flight at 300 knots. Combined with the Sniper Advanced Targeting System and night vision, it becomes the perfect predator patient enough to hunt down each fast-moving boat in the darkness of the vast open sea. 3:55 a.m. Exploiting a seed gap, the pair of warthogs plunge down the mountain from the clouds. To avoid detection by early warning systems, they weave through the 150-meter-high sheer limestone cliffs along the Iranian coastline, using the rugged terrain to stay below radar detection range. They suddenly appeared at an altitude of just 30 meters, their wings nearly slicing through the foaming white waves. IRGC soldiers fell into a state of utter panic at the screech of jet engines right overhead. Amid the roar of the engines, the A-10 pilot faced shoulder-fired anti-aircraft fire and suicide drones frantically charging toward the air intake. 4 a.m. The sky blazed with a network of tracer rounds and flares. American pilots strained to execute 7 GG force turns just above the water's surface, causing blood to rush to their feet and their vision to narrow, all to evade the rain of drones and missiles. They continuously dropped chains of magnesium heat-seeking decoys, burning at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, creating blinding flashes that reflected off the pitch-black sea. Amid the chaos, the A-10 formation stabilized and the pilots locked onto targets via their HUD screens. The GAU-8/A Avenger cannon officially let loose. The distinctive brrrt roar echoed, drowning out the sound of the ocean waves. Every second, 65 30mm depleted uranium rounds tore through every obstacle, turning the fleet of speedboats into a gruesome graveyard of flaming debris and long oil slicks on the water's surface. 4:10 a.m. As the battle on the water raged fiercely, a new invisible threat began to emerge from the depths below. The Seahawk immediately switched its multi-mode radar to high-resolution short-range scanning to search for small objects near the water's surface. The sensors began picking up faint metallic signals just inches above the churning water. These were not waves. They were the rhythmic signatures of Iran's Maham-class smart mines, sophisticated explosive devices anchored to the seabed designed to detonate via acoustic or magnetic triggers. The pilot's voice echoed over the secure communication network at emergency priority. The Vampire isn't the only threat. We have an underwater minefield at coordinates 7 Alpha. Hard turn immediately. 4:15 a.m. Inside the Arleigh Burke class destroyer's Combat Information Center, the atmosphere shifted from an offensive stance to a survival mode. The captain orders an emergency stop and executes a sharp, hard-to-starboard turn. The 9,000-ton destroyer heels over its hull, groaning under the strain as it narrowly avoids a cluster of mines that could have ripped the ship in two. The AN/SQ-Q89 system detected the Maham Strait, which was heavily mined, and living torpedoes, semi-submersible suicide boats closing in. The Arleigh Burke class destroyer found itself in a pincer movement. It could either remain stationary and take the hit to sweep the mines, or move to evade the suicide boats and risk hitting a mine. 4:20 a.m. This is the final tactical trap. If the U.S. destroyer moves to evade the suicide boats, it risks hitting a mayhem mine. If it stays put to sweep for mines, it will become a sitting duck for the approaching wave of IRGC suicide units on the sea. The tension is palpable as the second wave of the swarm, faster and more aggressive than the first, begins to accelerate. These boats are designed to ram ships at the waterline, targeting the thin steel of the hull to cause catastrophic flooding. The U.S. crew is now caught between the mine-laden threat and the suicide boats, with only a few seconds to decide between being slowly sunk or blown up instantly. 4:25 a.m. With the fleet pinned down, the captain of the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer authorized the nuclear option of non-physical warfare, activating the full power of the shipborne electronic warfare system. This was not mere jamming. It was a high-intensity electromagnetic wave attack. The destroyer's electronic warfare arrays focused an extremely powerful radio frequency energy beam sweeping across the strait. The effect was immediate. The remaining Ababil decoy drones, having lost their GPS signals and command links, began falling from the sky like dead birds. The IRGC's suicide swarm lost its cohesion. Without central coordination, the speedboats began colliding with one another in the darkness, their pilots blinded as their navigation screens displayed nothing but white static. 4:30 a.m. As the electronic fog cleared the path, the ship's defensive perimeter contracted in preparation for the final steel rain. Raytheon's Phalanx CIWS close-in defense system, affectionately nicknamed Hot-Tempered R-2D, 2 by the crew, began its automatic search and destroy cycle. Its internal band radar locks onto any object moving faster than 20 knots within a 1.5-mile radius. The M61A 120mm Vulcan cannon begins to rotate its barrel, spitting out a continuous stream of tungsten armor-piercing rounds at a rate of 4,500 rounds per minute. The night sky is illuminated by continuous flashes from the gun muzzle as the Phalanx system shreds the living torpedoes less than 500 meters from the ship's hull. 4:35 a.m. At the same time, the 5-inch Mark 45 Mod 4 naval gun at the ship's bow, manufactured by BAE Systems, begins firing at a rapid rate. It uses airburst rounds with multifunctional fuses. These rounds are programmed to detonate precisely at a height of 3 meters above the water surface, creating a deadly cone of fire containing thousands of shrapnel fragments. This rain of molten metal swept away the last remaining IRGC speedboats that had managed to evade the Phalanx's barrage. The Strait, once a chaotic swarm of Iranian aggression, is now a graveyard of sinking hulls and shattered dreams. The U.S. Navy did not merely survive the blockade, it systematically dismantled the IRGC's naval doctrine in a matter of minutes. Tehran's greatest hope was extinguished by the superior integration of U.S. fire control systems and electronic superiority. 4:45 a.m. The nature of the battle officially shifted from desperate defense to all-out retaliation. The Arleigh Burke-class destroyer was no longer prey. It had become the hunter. High above the Boeing P-8A, Poseidon used its AN/APY-10 radar to see through the gunfire and water spray, pinpointing the exact source of the aggression. The hidden missile silos and submarine bunkers of the IRGC carved deep into the limestone cliffs on Keshim Island. The coordinates were transmitted in real time to the A-10 Warthogs. The Warthogs returned for a final strike, this time carrying Raytheon's GBU-12 Paveway 2 laser-guided bombs. Guided precisely by the Poseidon's laser designation system, the A-10s dropped their bombs. The bombs struck the cave entrance with absolute precision, triggering secondary explosions from fuel and ammunition depots, collapsing the IRGC's secret bunkers and burying the remaining reserve forces under thousands of tons of rock and debris. 5 a.m. The blockade was shattered. The Arleigh Burke-class destroyer advanced deep into the main shipping lane, asserting absolute control, leaving behind the ruins of an ambitious campaign that had gone up in smoke. Tehran's Hormuz gatekeeper operation was systematically dismantled in less than 2 hours. The strategic advantage Iran had hoped to secure the power to hold the global oil supply hostage vanished into the morning mist, leaving behind only the smell of burning fiberglass and shattered ambitions. What would have happened if Iran hadn't launched that reckless swarm attack? If Tehran had opted for a stealthy strategy relying solely on secretly laying mines and lying low, they might have forced the U.S. into a grueling, weeks-long mine-sweeping operation, stalling the global economy through instability. But by choosing open aggression, they walked straight into the Pentagon's trap. They gave the U.S. Navy a clear target, allowing A-10s and destroyers to turn the strait into a live-fire range. Iran did not merely lose a naval battle, it lost its most powerful geopolitical strategic asset. A single tactical miscalculation by the IRGC caused their greatest hope for regional dominance to end in a humiliating and swift defeat.